infrastructure.
A long campaign is now over.
This is the car market in Mogadishu.
NATO's military success against
many Western nations.
This is on assignment.
Hello and welcome to On Assignment, bringing you a unique perspective on some of the world's top stories. I'm Alex Villarreal.
And I'm Philip Alexio. Coming up, the conflict in Gaza through the eyes of a VOA reporter.
Accused spy Edward Snowden remains in Russia, but his revelations are still reverberating in the U.S.
And later on, a Cold War relic, now open for business as a tourist destination. Don't go away. On Assignment is ready to launch.
Well, we've all been watching the latest conflict between Israel and Palestinian militants in the Gaza Strip. The fighting has killed more than 2,000 people, most of them Palestinian civilians.
Well, in more than 4 weeks of fighting, homes and businesses have been destroyed on both sides of the border, with Hamas firing rockets into Israel and Israel pounding Gaza with airstrikes.
VOA's Scott Bobb has been in the midst of the action for the better part of a month, making several trips into some of Gaza's worst-hit neighborhoods. I talked with him via Skype. Describe for us the level of devastation that you saw.
Well, in some areas it was relatively light, and then in others it was almost total. Some of these areas along the border with Israel, the boundary, were just completely razed, entire neighborhoods, and also in the north. In others it was an isolated building, a mosque, an office building or a company, and then there were some areas like rockets that seemed to sort of hit randomly on apartment buildings, often the top floors, or sometimes it seemed they were targeted, sometimes not. But every Gazan that I spoke to knew people who had been killed, who had been wounded, distant family members or close family members. And so really you could say that the entire territory of 1.8 million people has been traumatized by this ordeal.
Late morning in Beit Lahia, north of Gaza City. Although it is a workday, this is a ghost town. Most residents fled during the Israeli military incursion here. The purpose was to eliminate tunnels and rocket sites of the Hamas group that controls Gaza. Residents were warned ahead of time to leave the area for their safety, but some chose to stay.
Scott, I want to talk about the hospital you went to. How have the medical resources during this time been holding up?
Well, they are strained beyond belief. There are not enough beds. There's not enough medicine. There's not enough staff, according to the doctors I spoke to. Staff members and volunteers are working 2 8-hour shifts every 24 hours, which means they work 8 hours and they're off for 4 hours. And they've been doing that since the conflict began a month ago. So this strain is going to continue because even though perhaps there are no new wounded arriving, there are 9,000 wounded that continue to need care. They're trying to send some of them to other countries, Egypt, Jordan, even Israel in its field hospital.
What are going to be the lingering psychological effects of this? Long
term, of course, we think of the children first, and I've done reports earlier on this, the degree of trauma, post-traumatic stress disorder they experience, bedwetting, regressive behavior, lower grades in school, disinterest in school, sometimes withdrawal. All of these are what children often show, and there are very few facilities in Gaza to deal with that. There are a few, but they're not very many, and also culture itself is not one that encourages people with problems to seek out help. Also adults, women particularly, are very reluctant to come forward, and so they will often exhibit physiological problems, headaches, or pains requiring medicine. And psychologists I spoke to say that often this is what they see among women. They'll come with a physiological malady asking for medicine, and so you have a problem with drugs, drug abuse, drug use, and so forth. Among the men, again, similar thing, anger, denial, fear, withdrawal.
Looking ahead, what's next for Gaza?
Well, I was talking to some analysts and people who have been through this before, and they say, you can't even start to talk about reconstruction because we've got 400 to 500,000 people without homes. They're living in schools that are supposed to reopen in 3 weeks. we've got to, first of all, find places for them to stay and find a regular way to keep them supplied with food, medicine, and their needs. And not to forget that sanitation, water supply, and sewage have been severely damaged during the war. And so you have the threat of disease outbreaks, communicable diseases. And all of this has to be dealt with really before you can start to rebuild. So we're looking at a tremendous humanitarian need here. And I think it's only beginning to dawn on the general public and a lot of people just how extensive it's going to be.
All right, and of course we have to thank Scott for going into Gaza, reporting for us there on the ground.
All right, just ahead, Alex, I'll be talking with our senior analyst about changes in U.S. intelligence in the wake of Edward Snowden. Stick around. Former U.S. intelligence contractor Edward Snowden remains in Russia after being granted temporary residence for up to 3 years. The United States accuses Snowden of espionage after going public with some key intelligence documents, and the consequences of that are still being felt in the intelligence community. Well, VOA senior analyst Andre Dinestra has been following the Snowden case and joins me now here in the studio. And Andre, how much has changed since Edward Snowden's revelations over the past year or so?
It's difficult to say what has changed, but remember that one of the things that Edward Snowden wanted to achieve, and he said it, is that he wants the United States public to be involved in a discussion about the wide range of programs that the intelligence services have. And so that has absolutely opened up the Pandora's box, if you will. You have a number of laws going to go through Congress. You have a presidential group that gave some recommendations. So a lot of things are moving now. How far they will go, it's still to be seen.
Now, there's certainly been a lot of uproar about what the U.S. has been doing as far as surveillance with other countries internationally, and I presume it's had some sort of an effect on countries around the world.
Absolutely. One of the revelations was that the United States was spying on its allies. So you have ally versus ally. For example, the key question was Angela Merkel, the German chancellor. Her cell phone was bugged. So one would, and of course there was a big tiff. One would argue that you don't spy on allies, but it's been a historical case all the time. I mean, there's nothing new. I mean, I wasn't surprised to know that we're spying on the French, they're spying on us. I mean, it's nothing new. It's just basically because it was in the revelations within the whole Snowden affair that it suddenly was blown up into.
So far, with the information that he's put out so far, is he a traitor, I guess is the question.
Well, that is a question that everyone is asking, because if you go strictly by the legislation, by the law, he isn't, because treason is levying war against the United States. In other words, bring conscription or paying soldiers to wage war. So in that strict sense, no, he's not. Others say, no, wait a minute. He came out. These are secret documents. These are classified documents. Surely it has hurt the American intelligence community to have them out. So he is a traitor. So there's this discussion on that specific level.
Now, we hear about Edward Snowden, but has this sort of thing occurred before? Have there been other sort of Edward Snowdens that we've never really heard much about?
It's interesting you asked, because yes, I've done some research on that specifically, because everybody is, of course, as you say, talking about Snowden. But in 1960, two NSA officials, two NSA employees, William Martin and Bernard Mitchell, defected to the Soviet Union at that time, in 1960. This was a couple of years after the creation of the NSA. And they also felt, oh my goodness, this is what we're going to say. We're going to reveal all of these surveillance things. And you know what they also revealed? That allies were spying on allies. This is 1960. Right. So here we are X amount of years later, and this big, so anyway, they came out, they held a press conference, and after that they more or less disappeared. Right. But that specifically, these two were NSA employees, just after a couple of years of the creation of the NSA. So Snowden is not the first one, no.
Right. Interesting. Well, he's got more to come, I'm sure. Andre Denesner, our senior analyst, thanks for coming on to the program, my friend.
Pleasure.
All right. Coming up on the program, when we come back, a blast from the past of a Cold War relic. You're watching On Assignment.
The United States plans to shrink the total number of land-based nuclear missiles by 2018 as part of a treaty with Russia signed in 2011. But negotiations on decreasing Cold War-era nuclear missiles actually began several decades ago under President Ronald Reagan.
Well, at the time, there were thousands of land-based nuclear missile sites across the United States, and many of them in the state of North Dakota. But as the number of nuclear missiles shrunk, so did the need for launch sites. VOA's Kane Faribaugh visited one such facility and tells me all about it.
The place where I went is very similar to what an active launch control facility for these nuclear missiles looks like today. A lot of the equipment that you see when you're down there 70 to 100 feet below the surface is the same equipment that they're using in the active Minuteman missile silos that are spread across the country today. However, it's interesting because when these were decommissioned in 1998, everything that was inside the building was left as it is. So when you walk into the structure for the first time and you walk on the upstairs part of the launch facility, you'll see magazines, Time magazines, Newsweek magazines, ping pong tables. These things are all as they were on the day that the people who lived here or manned these things left in 1998.
Oscar Zero is now called the Ronald Reagan Minuteman Missile State Historic Site. Supervisor Gwen Hinman offers tours below the surface, taking visitors into the heart of the front line of the Cold War, where a small crew of missileers waited behind thick steel blast doors and reinforced concrete for the fateful decision to launch their nuclear missiles.
We like to say they were training for a job that they hope to never have to do.
But it is a job someone still has. About 150 active missile sites remain in North Dakota.
Now, I thought it was interesting that they actually had the key in the ignition, so to speak, ready to go. So how quick were they? How quick could they launch a nuclear missile back then?
Well, they could do it very quickly, but it has to be an order from the president. Now, it's a little bit of a misnomer because those keys are actually not necessarily in the ignition. What would happen is these missileers had codes and separate access to separate parts of a lockbox that's also in the facility. There really is a rigorous security fail-safe in place to prevent any one person from being able to launch one of those nuclear missiles. But, you know, there was a time when there was always this active state of readiness that you could get called to pull that key out of its lockbox at any time.
So how much room is down there? How much square footage? Is it a living area? I guess the military would be down in there for long periods of time.
You know, they would work 24-hour shifts down there, maybe even a little bit longer. It's interesting. It's the size of perhaps a large apartment or a small house. One side of this structure is where the generator or the diesel engines or the things that power the place are located. That's on one side. And on the other side is this small launch control facility. When they were actually there in the Cold War, you know, you're behind very thick steel blast doors, very thick concrete, and it's all really buffered in the event that should there have been a nuclear war, this facility would have been protected against the fallout or the impact of a nuclear missile.
Now, North Dakota has a whole lot of missile silos there. I guess you mentioned something 150 or so, something like that now. So what's so special about North Dakota that they wanted to use so much of that space for nuclear missile sites?
Well, North Dakota is home to two Air Force bases, one of them being Minot, the other Grand Forks. And during the height of the Cold War, both of these facilities were in charge of the nuclear missiles that were spread out throughout North Dakota. I think at the height of the Cold War, there were something like 1,100 nuclear missiles spread out in North Dakota alone.
Wow.
And talking to the Secretary of State of North Dakota, Alvin Yeager, he said the running joke in North Dakota during that time was that North Dakota was the third largest nuclear power in the world because they had so many nuclear missiles stationed across the state. So I think right now there are about 450 intercontinental ballistic missiles that are spread out across the United States.
Right.
However, applying treaty obligations, the United States is now going to reduce that number by 50, and that is the lowest number since the height of the Cold War.
Thanks again to VOA's Kane Faribaugh. New technologies are often greeted with enthusiasm. Personal computers, for example, have been a huge boost to education, entertainment, and careers, but controversy has been brewing over a type of a computer in a debate that pits privacy against technology.
Right now, this computer we're talking about is Google Glass, just one of a number of technologies that you can wear.
Oh, great.
Yeah. In this On Assignment Rewind report, I talked with one of our colleagues who took a pair out for a spin to see Americans' reactions to it.
I'm VOA's Carolyn Pursuti, and this is Google Glass. Here at VOA, we've been given Glass for use in news coverage. These correspondents are hard at work, producing packages with unique and different angles. This right here is Google Glass. So you wear them just like glasses, and as soon as I put them on, they turn on. All right, and this shows you exactly what I'm seeing. So I'm actually screencasting on my phone. So as I go through the choices, see, that tells me that I'm connected to the wireless network.
So you're seeing something right now.
I am right through this prism right here. That's the camera right there. All right, and I'm going to tell it to basically tape you. There we go. So I'm recording this segment as well, and you can see it in what's mirrored on my phone.
So I see this lens point here. So the idea behind Google Glass is what? What's the purpose?
Well, it's wearable technology. So if you can imagine it, it's like my iPhone is part of my head, right? But I'm looking through my iPhone. If I were taping on my phone, I wouldn't be able to see you so well, right? I'd be looking into it like this, but I can literally see through the picture at you.
Here's what you see on Glass when it first starts up. The first page says, "OK Glass." Now, by simply saying that, "OK Glass," see what happens? I've switched the display to a menu.
You've done a number of stories using Google Glass, a number of reports. What would you identify as being some of your favorite moments and these unique capabilities that you have using this technology?
Well, one of the most interesting ones that we just did was we took Google Glass on the mall, and the Washington Mall, and we decided to find out what people thought and to get their impressions. So I'm recording you right now.
This woman worries about Glass secretly taping her children.
For every pervert in the nation to see. I wouldn't want that.
There are concerns, though, about this technology because you can videotape. Just you're sitting. It almost looks like you're wearing some kind of space-age techie glasses, and you can videotape. So what are the concerns that people have about it?
Absolutely, there are concerns, and in fact, when you go outside, you can wear these lenses, and so they look like sunglasses. So you don't really know.
You don't even see, yeah.
Right, it's very difficult to see, especially if I'm far away from you. So the concerns are, I may be taping you when you don't want to be taped. I may be going into an area where I shouldn't tape, and the person who's wearing the glasses is taping surreptitiously.
Man, I think when you walk around here, you're always on camera.
One of the stories that you did that was one of my favorites is you got a chance to talk to and feature the group Pentatonics, the a cappella group, very talented group. They've become extremely successful on YouTube. What did you do with them?
I asked the lead singer to wear Google Glass.
So tap it, 707, tap it.
Prior to the group's Washington, D.C. concert, I went backstage to teach lead singer Scott Hoying how to use Glass to record video.
So Scott Hoying wore these glasses, and he introduced them to the audience, telling them that Voice of America had given them these glasses, and he said, I'm going to do this whole song with you all, and you're going to help me.
I feel like a Star Trek character with these on. I'm really excited.
It was fascinating to see from a performer's perspective.
It's interesting because I can see a little square of the screen when I look at you. I can sort of see a reverse image of what you're seeing.
And that's how when other people wear it, that's how I can tell if they are seeing anything. Especially if I don't have my smartphone with me. You want to try them on?
Yeah,
so
I'd love to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah, why not? Obviously,
Tap it
I'm a new user. Okay.
Swipe down.
Okay.
Swipe down to get out of it.
Okay.
Did you hear
I
the
heard
whoosh?
a sound, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, interesting. What do you think is the future of this?
But I think wearable technology is going to take off in various ways. You may see cameras on your contact lenses, or you may be talking into your watch maybe more.
Yeah.
I don't know what they're going to come up with, but I'm sure it's going to sort itself out probably in the next 10 years. But this is definitely the future. It's small, it's compact, it's just one of many wearable technologies out there, and that's why we're using it at VOA. We're trying to figure out which technology works best for us to show the viewer our best stories.
Oh, it's a camera. She gotta do like this to it. I can see myself right there.
So much fun, isn't it, Phil, to get another look there at Google Glass?
That's right, and you got to be careful now with Carolyn if she's going to be wearing that all the time.
Yeah, that's right. You got to worry about your privacy potentially.
That's exactly right.
Well, I am happy that she was there and she was able to show me how it all works. And now we go from one of the newest technological marvels to one of the oldest.
Well, just outside of Washington, D.C. is a 19th century grist mill, and it still operates the same way it did 200 years ago, offering fresh grits and flour for local residents and restaurants. In this next segment, we head to Colvin Run Mill, where the 19th century meets the 21st.
Miller Mason Maddox Jr. and his two assistants are preparing to align the milling stones that they believe are the original ones used in the 1800s. They need to make sure the hand-chiseled stones that weigh about 1,000 kilograms are positioned very close to one another, but never touch.
The stones have to be perfectly balanced. If they touch, it'll create heat, and that'll break down the product and make it not as good.
On the first and third Sundays of each month, visitors to Colvin Run Mill can watch the miller grind corn or wheat.
This is a very quality process. It grinds slower than modern milling. It retains more nutrients in the product as it comes out. Plus, it doesn't damage the flour as much by keeping it cool.
The mill dates back to the 18th century, when George Washington owned the property and built the mill's foundation. The mill itself was not constructed until 1811, and it changed hands a few times until Addison Millard purchased it in 1883. His family operated it for the next 50 years.
Then it became falling apart. The Fairfax County government acquired the mill. They started a huge restoration project.
In 1970, the county rebuilt the 6-meter diameter water wheel.
This mill operates 100% by water power. The water goes onto the water wheel, and the weight of the water actually turns the gears, which eventually will turn the drives that power the millstones.
The ground grains are sold in the mill's general store. Matthew Warshaw, chief executive at the Hyatt Hotel restaurant outside Washington, is a loyal customer.
At my restaurant, I like to use local ingredients. When I found that the mill produced grits utilizing local grown corn, I thought it was a perfect fit.
Maddox says although the mill produces quality products, its main goal is education.
Because they've lost the connection between the farms and the mills and the bread that they eat every day. So it's nice to be able to educate the public.
He hopes Colvin Run Mill remains an educational site for another 200 years. For producer June So, I'm Carol Pearson, VOA News.
Well, that is our show for this week, but it lives on at voanews.com.
And also on Facebook, and just search for VOA On Assignment and leave a comment about our program or like our page.
Thank you so much for watching. We will see you next week.